Discover the ultimate solution to getting over an ex with these two, who decided to erase their memories. You won't believe what happens next. We start out seeing this guy, Joel, wake up. He goes outside and finds out that his car is a little wrecked. He suspects it's his neighbor, so he just leaves a note, gets in the car, and drives off. Now we're at a train station, and we hear this voice say, "Random thoughts? Prevalent thoughts? Day 2004. Then boom, we see Joel making a dash for the train. He gets in, but only just. The way he just started running though, you would have thought he stole something. On the train, he's thinking to himself how he's going to get his car fixed. He's now at a payphone calling in sick. Then he's at the beach first writing in his diary, and then throwing rocks into the water. When he sees a woman, he's talking to himself about possibly meeting someone new, but then he says the chances of that happening are low as he struggles to even look women in the eye. Relatable. This makes him consider getting back with his ex Naomi. It's never a good idea, brother. Anyway, he goes into a diner, and he can see the lady from the beach, and he's just staring. Next thing, he's asking himself why he always falls in love with every woman who gives him the tiniest bit of attention. I ask myself the same question every day, brother. But this woman makes things worse for him. She flirts with him a little at the train station, and on the train, she just walks up to him and starts a conversation. Apparently, she knows him from his shop at Barnes & Noble's. He doesn't really remember her though. She finally introduces herself. Her name is Clementine, and she's making Joel a little uncomfortable. She gives him a little punch and lets him be. But when they get off the train, Joel sees her and offers her a ride. He drops her off at home and she invites him in. This unintended first date is going really great for our brother. Love this for you, Joel. How do you think this ends? Not what you think, actually. She tells Joel she's going to marry him, and she initiates a proper date. Lord, I can see what you're doing for others. But Joel says he has to go even though she wants him to stay. So she gives him her number and tells him to call. He gets home and that's the first thing he does. So the next day they're on their second date on ice. It's a pretty dangerous date, and you can tell that Joel would normally not do this, but he's with Clementine, so anything goes. They're at this place all night, and he drives her home in the morning, but she says she wants to go to his house instead. She says she wants to go upstairs to quickly grab her toothbrush, and when she's gone, this random guy comes to Joel's window and is asking him what he can do for him. It's a very awkward conversation, and the guy leaves shortly after. Both Joel and I are confused, and I get even more confused because why is Joel crying in his car now? He takes out this tape and throws it out the window. Also, it's night now. What's going on here, please? He gets home, changes into his pajamas, takes a pill, and looks outside his window to see some guys waiting for him in a van. He turns off his lights and boom, they start making their way up. But the confusion has only just begun, because now we see Joel talking to his friends, Rob and Carrie, who were both dating by the way, and telling them that he and Clementine had a fight. He goes to her place of work with some stuff he got her for Valentine's, and she's with another guy. She acts like she doesn't even know who Joel is. Joel is distraught, but Rob finally puts him out of his misery when he hands him this card which basically says Clementine has erased Joel from her memory. Joel is dumbfounded, but he's not ready to just accept his fate, so he asks Rob where the note came from, and he immediately heads there. In the building, we see one of those guys from the van the other night. Okay, this is interesting. Joel meets a doctor who tells him that Clementine was not happy and wanted to move on, and that's what they did for her. Joel is now back with his friends looking so distraught, and the next day, he heads back to the doctor. Is this man even qualified to be called a doctor? You know what? Let's just leave it at technician. His name is Howard, by the way. So Joel says he wants Clementine erased from his memory too. Howard says cool. He'll just have to go home and bring any and everything that might remind him of Clementine. Clothes, books, CDs, gifts she bought him, everything. Joel quickly does that, and he's locked in for a session with Stan, one of the guys from the van. By the way, these guys say that February is their busiest month because of Valentine's, and I understand. Thankfully, nobody wants me, so I don't ever have to erase anybody from my memory. Before his memory is erased though, Joel is required to tell the story of how he met Clementine to a tape recorder, and the story is different from what we saw earlier. He says he was living with his ex, Naomi, at the time, when Rob and Carrie invited them for a party at the beach. Naomi could not go, so he went without her, and that's how he met Clementine. We'll circle back to that later. Anyway, the procedure begins, and it's, simply put, pretty crazy. One moment he's in the lab, the next he's at home. Another moment he's stepping into the lab and watching himself being operated on, all while going through different memories. It's all just really crazy. But while he's going through the memories, we hear him say, "This is the last time I saw you." And then we see Clementine walk into the house by 3 a.m. to see him reading a book. She tells him she wrecked his car and he calls her pathetic and irresponsible. Clementine then tells him that the real reason he's angry is because she was out tonight without him, and he's thinking she probably got down and dirty with someone else. Then Joel makes the grave error of saying yes, that's really what he was thinking, and says, "Isn't that how you get people to like you?" He says, "Brutal." Immediately after he says that, Clementine gets up, starts packing her things, and she leaves. Joel is following her around, apologizing and begging, but she doesn't even listen to him. She just packs up and leaves. He follows her downstairs, and we see how that dent on his car came about. He follows her and asks to drive her home, but she still doesn't agree. She's done. At this point, his head is now messing with him, and we're back to these technicians working on his brain and memory. Patrick, Stan's assistant, is talking about how he met Clementine the day they were erasing her memory of Joel, and he fell in love with her instantly, stole her undies, and then went on to ask her out later. Of course, Stan thinks that's ridiculous. You know your situation is bad when it's a Stan telling you you're insane, if you catch my drift. By the way, the conversation they're having is seeping into Joel's memory, and it's really messing with him. Next thing, we see another fight between Clementine and Joel. This one started when Clem said she wanted to have a baby, and Joel basically implied that she can't take care of one yet. They're really arguing loudly in the middle of the road now. Back to the technicians, and Stan's girlfriend joins them in Joel's house. His girlfriend, by the way, is his secretary from the office, Mary. They have a drink, tell a few jokes, and we're now back to another Joel and Clementine fight. Then we see Patrick talking with Clementine over the phone, and it's messing with Joel's head again. He heads to Clementine's workplace, still in his head, of course, and is trying to see who the guy she's with is, but he can't see his face no matter how hard he tries. Well, Clem wants Patrick to come around, and Stan lets him leave. We now see Stan and Mary sharing a smoke and some snacks just at the foot of Joel's bed, and Mary just won't stop talking about their boss, Howard. It seems like someone has a huge crush. Meanwhile, Patrick arrives at Clementine's house and she's having a mental breakdown. She asks him to travel with her right away, so he calls Stan and tells him he won't be able to come back tonight. Then we see something significant. Patrick digs into his bag and reads a line from Clementine's old journal. Remember, she had to submit everything that reminded her of Joel before her memory of him could be erased? It now appears that Patrick is using all those things as a guide to winning and keeping Clementine. Now Joel is going through some pretty pleasant memories he had with Clementine, the one where they were on the ice and one where they were having an emotional pillow talk. He begs to keep these memories, but of course that's not even an option. In his head he's shouting that he wants this whole thing called off, but in reality he's completely mute while Stan and Mary dance on his memory grave. You can now see that he's fighting the erasure, but it's not working. He's fighting really hard to wake himself up, and he seems to wake up for a second, but he goes back to sleep and is back in his memory with Clementine. Clementine in his head now suggests that he take this memory of her to somewhere that she doesn't belong, so that when the erasure guys get to this point, they won't see her to erase. You get what I'm saying, right? He then takes her into a memory of his childhood, and this is all just really warped, but it seems like that worked because his memory just stops erasing all of a sudden, and Joel is off the map. Stan is panicking and Mary is making it worse. She eventually asks Stan to call Howard, and even though he didn't want to at first, he eventually does. Howard immediately starts heading to them. You can see from his wife's face that he doesn't like that idea, but what can she do? Meanwhile, in Joel's memory, he's now telling Clem about Patrick, and how he has basically used him to woo her. When he says that, we briefly see Clem and Patrick in real life. Clem is driving and is still freaking out. Howard arrives at Joel's apartment shortly after, and he starts trying to figure out what's going on. He immediately figures it out, and he tries to erase that childhood memory. Immediately as he does that, Joel makes a choking sound and his eyes open. Howard injects him with something, and Joel's eyes close again. But there are still troubles with erasing the memories. Stan points out that he's in a memory that they have already erased. Clem in his head comes up with another brilliant idea. She tells him to hide her under a humiliating memory, and he does that. He takes her to the time his mother caught him in an act of, never mind. Then they go somewhere else where he was being bullied as a child. It's all working because all this is really confusing Howard and Stan. Stan has had enough, so he goes out to get some air, leaving his girlfriend ample time to flirt with her boss. While she's really shooting her shot, we briefly see Joel addressing the elephant in his memory's room. Then boom, Mary gets up, walks up to Howard, and just gets really close to him. She then goes back to her seat, apologizing and fake crying. Howard goes over to her to console her, and consolation quickly turns to getting close. Stan is watching them from the window, but he doesn't seem to mind. He is settled with his fate. But then Howard's wife shows up and he tries to alert them by honking, but it's already too late. She has seen everything. Howard comes out and chases her while she drives away. Mary even joins in the begging, but the missus just tells her she can have him, and in fact tells Howard to tell the poor girl the truth. So apparently the truth is that Mary and Howard had an affair once before, and he erased her memory after that. He says she wanted the procedure. Now we see Joel at Clem's workplace trying to ask her out on a date, but not to worry, it's still all in his head. An angry Mary heads straight to the office and goes through the records. She finds a tape of her account of things before her memory was erased and plays it. As she's listening to it, she breaks down. Now we see Joel go all the way back to the memory of the day he met Clem, the beach party in Montauk. She came to him when he was sitting on his own, separated from the rest. They introduce themselves to each other and they go on to spend the whole day together. At night, Clem breaks into a house by the beach, and Joel joins her. He spends some time there and then leaves after she goes upstairs. But now, he's saying he wishes he had stayed. He was just scared. As his last memory of Clem is crumbling all around him, Clem tells him to meet her in Montauk, and we can literally see his mind now being transported. Next thing we see is Howard closing his laptop and saying, okay. It's morning and the procedure is finally done. Stan and Howard leave and Joel wakes up shortly after. He heads out to his car and this is where we started from. Joel shocked by the dent on his car and him suspecting his neighbor. That same morning, we see Stan running after Mary, who has packed up all her stuff from the office and is obviously leaving. He's begging and telling her he didn't know any of that happened. While that's happening, we see when Joel runs to catch his train, and then we fast forward to that point in the past, when things started getting a little confusing. The point when Joel drove Clem home, and she went up to get her toothbrush. She grabs some stuff and heads back to the car. One of the things she grabs is her mail, and she's reading it in the car of Joel. You won't believe this. Mary sent the files of every patient who had had their memories erased in Howard's establishment. Clem plays her tape in the car, and they're both really confused. Clem is saying some really harsh things about Joel on the tape, and he isn't finding it funny, so he stops the car and tells her to calm down. To be fair, he doesn't know what's happening, and his girlfriend just played a tape of her saying the absolute worst things about him. He thinks she's messing with him. Little does he know that she's just as confused as him. Clem gets down and walks back home where she sees Patrick. She yells at him to get away from her and just goes inside to cry. She cries for a bit and then picks herself up and heads to Joel's house. You can tell she doesn't know the place and needs directions, which is consistent with the fact that her memory of him was erased. In the house, she meets Joel listening to his own tape, and he apologizes for yelling yelling. She apologizes for saying mean things about him, and he does the same too. She's hearing mean things about herself on this tape, and she says she can't be here, so she leaves. Joel follows her to the hallway, and they decide to start over in spite of everything they've heard. Things that will very likely happen to them again. Moral of the story? Just stay single.